Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're stepping into Kowloon walled city, a place so dense and improvised that sunlight barely dares to enter. You'll carry your belongings through passageways slick with grease, the walls pressing close enough to brush your shoulders, the air already heavy with damp concrete and smoke. Before we follow those corridors deeper, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You step off the busy street and into the shadow of Kowloon walled city. Your belongings balanced awkwardly in your arms. Your family moved in several weeks ago and sent you instructions on how to find the right building. They made sense then, but faced with the winding alleyways before you, you realise finding the building will be no simple task. The moment you cross the threshold, the light changes. It doesn't dim gradually, the way evening does, soft and gentle, but collapses in an instant. What passes for a street outside, noisy, chaotic, open to the sun, seems like another planet. In here, the alleys close around you immediately, swallowing the last of the sky. You are not entering a neighbourhood. You are being absorbed by something larger than you, something indifferent. Concrete walls rise so close together that the gap above is no wider than a ribbon, a faint grey line where you know daylight still exists. That narrow seam might as well be unreachable sky. The first shock is how narrow everything feels. The alley you've chosen is barely wide enough for your shoulders, and carrying a bag only makes the squeeze worse. You turn sideways, scrape against plaster, and try not to notice how damp the walls feel beneath your fingertips. Pipes rattle above your head, layers upon layers of them, running like exposed intestines in every direction. They leak, they drip, they sweat, and the drops fall without rhythm, striking your arms, your bags, your face. For a moment, you think of rain. But rain is clean, a gift from the sky. This is not. This is the recycled water of thousands of strangers' kitchens, their wash basins, their baths, and their toilets, trickling down through rusted seams to baptize you as you pass beneath. You shift your weight and press further in. The ground is uneven, slick with oil in places, and you quickly realize there is no clear division between what counts as a street and what doesn't. The floors are patched with concrete here, rotting wood there, sometimes just flattened metal sheets thrown across a hole. A few steps in, the outside traffic fades, muffled by the layers of walls, until it is replaced by something else entirely. Inside the walled city, sound behaves differently. It doesn't travel outward into space, but bounces back and forth between surfaces, compressed like the people who live here. A single clatter echoes longer than you expect. A cough or a cry sounds both near and far, distorted by corridors that bend away before you can follow them. Even your own footsteps sound strange, as if the building has eaten them and belched them back at you. The farther you walk, the less certain you are of direction. You thought you would step into an alley, follow a clear path, and find the stairwell that leads to your new home. But this is no grid, no neat arrangement of streets and blocks. This is improvisation solidified into concrete. Walls were raised where space permitted. Balconies were extended until they touched. Staircases were nailed onto other staircases. And over decades, the result became a labyrinth where logic collapsed. Your eyes search for landmarks, but everything looks the same. Bare plaster walls streaked with black mould, metal grates with laundry dripping from them, broken fluorescent lights that flicker even during the day. The sensation of being consumed deepens. You are not moving into a city. You are being pulled down the throat of something alive. Carrying your things becomes harder the deeper you go. The air thickens, sticky with heat and damp, and your skin clings to your clothes in ways you cannot escape. Outside, the breeze could carry away sweat. In here, there is no breeze, only humidity that grips you and refuses to let go. You smell frying oil from somewhere unseen, mingled with the raw stench of sewage, the sharp tang of disinfectant, and the sourness of mildew. It comes in waves, layered scents that replace each other without warning. One moment you catch the sweetness of incense burning in a shrine tucked into a corner. The next, the acrid sting of cigarette smoke fills your throat. Every inhalation feels like a gamble. Your vision adjusts, but never enough. Light bulbs hang in clusters where residents have run wires to illuminate the gloom, but they are weak, buzzing halos that cover only small patches of floor. Between them, darkness takes over. You keep moving forward, one step at a time, testing each surface before you shift your weight, praying the bag doesn't catch on an exposed pipe. The shadows make it impossible to tell how long the alley stretches. Every corner you turn opens onto another passage, narrower, darker, more intimate than the last. And every one of those corners feels the same, as though you're circling inside a single, endless intestine. Now and then you pass doorways. Some are nothing more than corrugated metal sheets pulled aside, revealing glimpses of tiny rooms beyond. You see a child crouched on the floor, eating rice from a tin bowl, the flicker of a television showing static, an old woman bent over a sewing machine. They're close enough to touch, yet completely sealed away, each family tucked into its own concrete cell, each life boxed up and stacked one atop another. The walls are too thin to grant privacy, yet too thick to allow connection. You carry your belongings past them all, feeling yourself added to the pile. A cat darts across your path, its fur matted, its paws slick with something it stepped in. You watch it disappear into a hole in the wall that seems too small for any living thing, and you realise that the animals navigate this maze better than humans. The people of the walled city may live here, but the cats own it. Their cries echo like ghosts in the corridors, a chorus that accompanies your slow progress deeper into the dark. After what feels like too long, you pause to rest, shifting your belongings from one arm to the other. The air sticks in your lungs, and you lean against the wall only to find it wet with condensation. It leaves a film on your sleeve. You glance upward, but there is no open sky, only a tangle of balconies and wires, layers upon layers, until your eyes can go no higher. It is as if the city has closed a lid above you. You push on again, following the faint memory of directions given to you earlier. Each turn looks the same, yet eventually, something changes. The alley opens, not into a street, not into a courtyard, but into a slightly wider space, where several passages intersect. You recognise this as the marker described to you. Relief flickers, quickly swallowed by the realisation that this wider spot is no more welcoming than the alleys. Trash piles in corners, water drips from above, a single bulb casts more shadow than light. Still, you know you're close. At last you see it. A stairwell cut into the wall, concrete steps rising upward into dimness. This is the way to your new home. You grip the stairwell rail, though it offers little comfort. The metal is slick with rust and condensation, and the moment your hand closes around it, the smell of iron lingers on your palm. The stairs rise steeply, concrete worn down by thousands of feet, and each step feels uncertain, uneven, as though it could crumble at any time. Your belongings weigh heavier than before, dragging at your arms as you climb into the dim passage above. The light barely reaches this far. A single bulb sways on its wire, buzzing faintly, casting shadows that dance across the walls. Pipes run along the ceiling, dripping occasionally, each drop echoing in the silence between your breaths. You notice how the sound carries strangely here. Footsteps from other stairwells seem to wander, as though they're approaching you from all sides at once. A voice filters down from above, muffled by plaster, then vanishes into the walls. The building seems alive, whispering and shifting, every surface vibrating with unseen movement. As you climb higher, the air changes. It doesn't freshen with height. Instead, it thickens, sour with mildew and smoke trapped in stairwells that rarely open to the outside. The heat presses down instead of lifting, reminding you there is no escape, only deeper layers of enclosure. You press on, step after step, shoulders brushing against flaking plaster. The walls narrow, patched with mismatched concrete, where cracks have been sealed and resealed. You try not to imagine how much weight rests above you. Layers of homes, factories, and lives stacked in impossible defiance of planning or safety. The stairwell bends and narrows until it opens onto a landing so small you could span it in 3 steps. Your family waits there. They press aside, making room for you, and gesture to a dented metal door, patched with scraps of plywood and held together by rust. It groans on its hinges as it swings open, and you are ushered inside. The air shifts again, heavier, thicker, as though every breath you take has already been borrowed by someone else. The room is a concrete box, or walls with no decoration, but stains and flaking paint. They tilt inward, not enough to collapse, but enough to remind you that space is not a luxury here. A single bulb hangs overhead, dangling from a crooked wire twisted around a nail. It buzzes faintly, producing just enough light to prove how little you have. The glow is jaundiced and weak, pooling more shadow than brightness. It seems exhausted by its own existence, though still doing better than you likely will after a few nights here. Your eyes take in the essentials: a mattress spread flat on the floor, another rolled against the wall, and a desk wedged under the bulb where one leg is shorter than the others. The desk tilts like it is bowing to the walls, apologizing for taking up precious inches. Above it, a shelf sags under the weight of dishes, tin cups, and whatever else can be balanced there without crashing down in the night. Every surface is pressed into service, every object given double duty. Nothing is here because it belongs. It is here because there was nowhere else for it to go. The fan squats on the desk like an old sentinel, rattling as it turns. Its blades are grey with a film of dust that the breeze scatters back into your face. It does not cool the room, nothing could, but it does circulate the heat, ensuring that misery is fairly distributed. You feel the air it pushes damp and sour, as though the city itself has been exhaled back at you. Each rotation sounds like a wheeze, a mechanical sigh that is given up on relief. You take a few steps forward. Those steps feels generous for what the space allows. From the door to the far wall, you count 3 strides at most, and even those are shortened by the clutter of beds and furniture. The floor is a patchwork of tiles, cracked and chipped, their patterns long since eroded by years of feet pressing down. You crouch and trace one with your hand, finding it damp to the touch. Moisture seeps upward here, uninvited and constant. The floor, the walls, even the air itself seem to sweat. There is no window, only a rectangle where one might have been, now covered by a piece of corrugated metal bolted into place. A narrow slit has been cut along the edge, letting in the faintest strip of daylight. It is not enough to see by, only enough to remind you of what you're missing. At night, the glow of a neon sign from the building opposite spills through, flooding the room with restless colours. Pink one moment, green the next, then orange, none of them natural, all of them intrusive. Day and night cease to matter here. The only clock is the light bulb above your head and its stuttering hum. You lower yourself onto the mattress, if mattress is the word. It is thin, collapsed into the floorboards by years of bodies, its fabric stained with sweat and mildew. You press your hand into it and feel the floor beneath almost immediately. The smell rising from it is a mixture of detergent and damp, as though someone tried to cleanse it once and the effort only fed the mould further. When you lie down at night, you will not rest on it so much as absorb it. A rope stretches across the ceiling, hung with sheets that sag in the humid air. They divide the box into sections, not rooms, but the suggestion of them. Behind the fabric, your family shifts and murmurs. The sheets give no privacy, only the illusion of it, like curtains drawn around a hospital bed. You can hear every motion, every breath, every whispered word. In a space this small, silence doesn't exist. It is replaced by the hum of constant, unwilling intimacy. The cupboard in the corner bears the weight of food and necessity. Its swollen doors won't close, warped by years of moisture. Inside are jars of pickled vegetables, packets of noodles, a bottle of soy sauce that leaks faintly at the rim. There is no refrigerator. The heat would have laughed at the attempt. Instead, food is stored in plain sight, where spoilage is only slowed by chance and regular cooking. At least you'll never forget what you own. It's always on display, whether you prefer it or not. Your bag finds no true resting place. You set it in a corner, but after a moment, you lift it again, unwilling to leave it where the damp will claim it. Even possessions struggle to live here. The walls, patched with plaster, that flakes at the touch, are streaked with black mould that creeps outward like veins. It grows with quiet determination, decorating the surfaces in a style the city has chosen for you. Wallpaper, designed by fungi. The longer you remain, the more you sense that the room has its own pulse. The bulb flickers, humming like a nervous heartbeat. The fan sighs as though straining for air. The damp presses into your lungs with each breath. It is not shelter in the usual sense. It is a box designed to remind you how much space you do not have. Your family navigates it with the ease of practice, stepping around each other with a choreography learned through repetition. You, the newcomer, still stumble, still expect a space that does not exist, still hope for the freedom to extend your arm without striking concrete. You lean back against the wall, and flakes of plaster cling to your shirt. The wall feels clammy, sweating as though it too resents being trapped in this room. You imagine the weight above, floors stacked endlessly, each one containing its own box just like this, each one pressing downward. You're not just in a home, you're beneath hundreds of homes, carrying them invisibly. The thought squeezes your chest. You try to picture how many meals will be eaten cross-legged on this floor, how many nights endured beneath this bulb, how many mornings greeted by the same stale fan. The answer, you realize, is too many. Intimacy here is relentless. Every cough, every restless shift, every whispered prayer in the night will be shared. Closeness is not optional. It is rationed out like humidity, always more than you wanted, never something you can escape. You're pressed into a life smaller than most kitchens and told to call it home. Time stalls inside the room. With no true day or night, you rely on the flicker of the bulb, the rattle of the fan, and the rhythm of your family's movements to measure passing hours. It is a clock made of exhaustion. You sink deeper into the mattress, feel the sweat cling, and recognize that comfort will never come. The room is not here to soothe you. It is here to hold you, briefly, until it passes you on to the walls beyond. You do not belong to it, you belong to the city. And then, just as you settle into the oppressive quiet, it happens. The walls, too thin to hold in your family's voices, are just as poor at keeping out others. The voices bleed in immediately, a chorus that the walls are far too thin to muffle. A baby's cry rings sharp through the plaster, followed by a cough that seems to shake the very bed frame in the room next to yours. Somewhere lower down, a radio sputters into static before bursting into a melody that struggles against the distance. Within moments of sitting still, you realize that your new life will be conducted with a constant audience, and that every sound you make will perform for an audience in turn. At first you tell yourself it's only because you're new here, more attuned to what the walls let slip. Surely you'll adjust, learn to tune it out, stop flinching at each intrusion. But the longer you sit, the more you realise that tuning it out is not the expectation. People don't ignore their neighbours here, they absorb them. The architecture has arranged it that way. Thin walls offer no distinction between your hours and theirs. Intimacy is forced, unavoidable, relentless. It is closeness without choice. The crying child continues almost constantly, and before long you know the rhythm of its hunger, the pitch of its frustration, and the brief sigh of peace when it finally collapses into sleep. You do not need to see the infant to know it. The sound alone sketches its life for you, day after day. Across the wall to your left, someone clears his throat again and again, the phlegm rattling in his lungs. He is not your friend, not your family, not even your acquaintance, yet his respiratory condition is now part of your nightly routine. The cough is not simply noise, it is your lullaby. In the morning you wake not to an alarm clock, but to laughter bursting through the floorboards, to the scrape of a chair on concrete in the next room, to the faint hiss of a wok being set on fire with oil. Someone nearby always rises earlier than you. Someone always sets the rhythm of your day. Privacy, once an expectation, now feels like a quaint rumour, a myth you must have misremembered from your previous life. Outside the walls, you know your neighbours' routines better than those of friends you might have lived beside for years elsewhere. Their lives overlap yours with more detail, yet you may never learn their names. Through the plaster, you piece together the outline of households. On one side, a mother hums to herself while chopping vegetables, the blade steady, the rhythm hypnotic. On the other, a man's voice rises and falls as he practices his Cantonese calligraphy, aloud, repeating the strokes like a prayer. Below, a woman listens to the radio and argues with its news as though it can hear her, each rebuke punctuated by the slap of her hand on the table. You know them without knowing them. You could describe the timbre of their voices, their habits, their tempers. If asked, you could identify their sounds in a crowded alley, but you would not recognise their faces if they brushed past you. At times, the proximity feels almost comic. You hear a sneeze so close it feels as though the stranger has leaned into your own bed. You hear a toilet flush and the water rush through the pipe, echoing like thunder through your ceiling. You hear the clink of chopsticks against a bowl and catch yourself salivating despite having already eaten. The city feeds you its collective soundtrack, whether you asked for it or not. And the joke is that you are expected to treat it all as background noise. But how can it be background when it is the only music you are allowed? Even the walls contribute to the orchestra. They groan at night with the shifting of pipes, the scratching of vermin, the settling of 1,000 stacked lives. Every sound is amplified, stretched thin, shared across boundaries. A dripping tap from the room below joins with the ticking of your fan until you cannot tell which is closer. You lie awake, eyes open, trying to separate the sources and then give up, realising it doesn't matter. None of it belongs to you alone. After several days, you notice your body adapting. You no longer pause when a voice breaks in. You pause when it doesn't. Silence unnerves you more than noise because silence here suggests absence. And absence in the walled city often means illness or worse. You learn to measure well-being by volume. The family on your right is healthy when their children shriek while chasing each other. They are ill when the children's games vanish for days at a time. The man with the cough worries you when his hacking grows faint. Community is not sought, it is overheard. There is an unspoken etiquette to all this. You pretend not to notice what you cannot help but notice. When the couple above you argues loudly, you lie still and make no comment the next day, when you pass them on the stairwell. When someone prays at midnight, voice breaking with desperation, You do not knock to ask if they're all right. You listen because you cannot help listening, and you ignore it because you cannot admit you heard. Everyone is constantly present in each other's lives, and everyone behaves as though they aren't. It is easy to believe that closeness breeds compassion, but here it more often breeds fatigue. You grow weary of other people's sorrows, resentful of their joys when you're too exhausted to share them. The child's laughter that wakes you in the morning is not charming, it is disruptive. The coughing man's survival is not admirable, it is inconvenient. Even the smells that drift through cracks in the walls, garlic frying, incense burning, rubber heating on a dentist's drill, wear you down, turning appetite into nausea. Closeness erodes tenderness until only irritation remains. And yet, there are moments when you forget yourself, when you are caught off guard by the humanity bleeding through the plaster. You hear a lullaby sung off key, and for a moment it softens you. You hear the rush of many voices at once when a neighbour's relatives visit, laughter weaving across the walls like a wave. You hear the careful sound of incense sticks being tapped against a bowl, a quiet prayer that rises in smoke through cracks in the ceiling. These moments remind you that you're part of something larger, unwilling though you are, and that your own voice too leaks into other rooms without your permission. You're both intruder and victim, participant and spectator. After nights of coughing, crying and radios bleeding through the plaster, you find yourself restless, your body desperate for quiet that never comes. The walls have proven useless at keeping the city out, so you turn instead to the only direction left, upward. The roof is whispered about in the corridors as the one place you might still glimpse the sky, as though a patch of daylight could undo the claustrophobia pressed into your chest. You climb the stairs with that fragile hope, convinced that if you can rise above the noise, you might finally breathe freely. The stairwell grows brighter as you ascend, each landing shedding a fraction more darkness, until you reach the final flight. Then, without warning, the door gives way to open air, and for the first time since entering the walled city, you see the sky. It is not vast, more a ragged patch framed by leaning towers of concrete, but after days of ceilings and walls pressing down, it feels endless. You step forward into the rooftop maze, blinking in the light, realizing too late that escape here does not mean silence. It only means a different kind of noise. The roof is no empty retreat. It is a second city perched precariously above the first, a sprawl of corrugated tin and scrap wood shacks patched together in defiance of balance. Water tanks squat like rusting guardians, leaking steadily onto the concrete below. Laundry lines crisscross the space, sagging under the weight of clothes that never quite dry in the humid air. The ground crunches under your feet, where broken tiles scatter, and the edges are always too close, the drop always just one misstep away. This is the closest thing to freedom here, the possibility of falling. Children run wild in this open space, darting between tanks and piles of scrap, their bare feet slapping against the hot concrete. Their laughter rings out sharp and bright, a sound that would almost be joyful, if not for the fact that it hovers inches from catastrophe. You watch one child chase another along the lip of the roof, their balance careless, their game played against gravity itself. No adults intervene. Perhaps they are too busy, or perhaps they have long accepted that the city takes its own tally of lives. Childhood here is a gamble, and the house always wins eventually. Adults are no less present. Women scrub clothes in plastic basins, slapping fabric against stone before pinning it to lines strung from one shack to another. Men squat in small groups smoking cigarettes, their voices rising in arguments that echo between the water tanks. A few have built makeshift gardens in battered tubs, sprouting bitter greens from soil that looks suspiciously borrowed from the alleys below. The roof is not a sanctuary. It is a marketplace, a playground, a laundry yard, a gambling den. It is every space crammed into one, because the city has nowhere else left to offer. The air is no kinder up here than below. You had hoped for freshness, but what greets you is the sharp sting of frying oil wafting up from the kitchens below, mixed with the sourness of sewage vents and the constant smoke of burning refuse. The breeze that reaches you carries with it all the concentrated aromas of 30,000 lives compressed into a single block. If anything, the wind makes it worse. It stirs the scents, blends them, and pushes them directly into your lungs. Still, the sun does reach you. It beats down harsh and unfiltered, striking your skin with a heat you almost welcome after the gloom of your room. You tilt your head back, squinting at the narrow strip of blue framed by leaning towers, and for a moment you almost convince yourself you are free. Then you lower your eyes and see the forest of wires tangled across the shacks, the maze of walkways that lead nowhere safe, the drop yawning beyond the edge. The sky is visible here, yes, but it is framed like a painting on the wall of a prison, a picture, not an escape. You wander further, careful to step only where others have stepped before you. The concrete is cracked in places, patched in others, and it is never clear how much weight it can bear. The shacks groan in the heat, their tin walls expanding and rattling in the breeze. Cats lounge atop water tanks, tails flicking lazily, as though they alone own this precarious kingdom. A game of mahjong clatters in one corner, the tiles snapping loudly against the board, punctuated by bursts of laughter and curses. You realise that up here, as below, noise is unavoidable. The only difference is that it echoes into the sky instead of through plaster. Looking out over the edge, you see more roofs beyond, stacked and stitched together, until they blur into one continuous sheet of patchwork metal. From above, the walled city looks less like a collection of homes and more like a junkyard that has grown legs and learned to breathe. You wonder how many layers of life are concealed beneath your feet, how many families cook, argue, pray, and sleep in the rooms below. The thought presses down on you, even here where the sky should make you lighter. The city is never content to let you forget its weight. You sit for a while on a low wall, trying to absorb the rare sensation of direct sunlight. It warms your arms, burns your neck, forces beads of sweat to rise across your skin. You remind yourself this is the closest thing to freedom you will find, and the irony stings almost as much as the heat. People outside these walls take the sky for granted. They do not think twice about the luxury of looking upward and seeing nothing but space. Here the sky's rationed, like everything else. You are permitted to borrow a glimpse, but never to keep it. The children scatter as a shout rings out, and for a moment you think it is a warning. Instead, it is only another game, another round of chaos added to the roof's soundtrack. You shake your head, half in amusement, half in dread, and rise to your feet again. The sun has begun to slide behind the leaning towers, and already the shadows stretch long across the concrete. The brief illusion of openness begins to collapse, replaced by the encroaching realization that the walled city surrounds you on all sides. Even the roof cannot offer an escape that lasts more than an hour. As the laughter fades and the arguments die down, another sound rises from below. It is not the cries of children or the chatter of neighbours, but the steady drone of machines, the hiss of boiling vats, the metallic scrape of tools. The industries of the walled city are alive beneath you, feeding smoke and noise upward until it seeps into the air. You realise that the roof is not a reprieve, but only a ceiling for another world stacked below. The freedom you sought leads only to another reminder of the city's endless appetite. You descend from the roof, the fleeting strip of sky shrinking with each step downward. The sun abandons you quickly, traded for the dense air of stairwells that grow hotter and thicker the farther you go. The hum of machines rises to meet you, a low vibration that worms its way into your chest. Before long, the noise becomes constant, filling every hollow space. The city's belly waits, and inside it, the work never stops. The first workshop you pass makes no attempt to hide itself. Behind a half-open door, steam billows outward in clouds so thick you cough before you even enter. A noodle maker tends to a vat that bubbles like a witch's cauldron, oil snapping violently as he stirs it with a paddle the length of his arm. The floor glistens with grease, slick enough to send you sprawling if you aren't careful. Bundles of dough are stacked against one wall, the raw smell of flour already sour in the humidity. The man doesn't look up. His eyes are fixed on the vat, as though if he blinks for too long, the entire contraption might collapse into flames. You edge past, feeling the heat cling to your skin, and realise you're already coated in oil you didn't consent to touch. The next space assaults you with a different flavour of discomfort. A dentist has claimed a corner room, its door propped open with a chair. Patients sit hunched in a line against the wall, clutching their jaws, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Inside, a man in a stained shirt works at a mouth, with tools that look like they were scavenged from a junkyard. The drill winds at a pitch that makes your teeth ache in sympathy, and the stench of disinfectant does nothing to disguise the coppery tang of blood. A bucket on the floor catches what drips. The patient does not scream, perhaps out of stoicism, perhaps because he has already screamed himself empty, but the silence is worse. Farther in, you stumble into a makeshift pharmacy. Bowls and basins line a wooden table, each filled with powders and liquids of uncertain origin. A woman grinds herbs with a stone pestle, her movements brisk and unbothered, while a boy beside her mixes liquids into bottles without labels. The air is sharp with menthol, bitter with roots, acrid with chemicals that sting your eyes. It smells like healing, if healing were indistinguishable from poisoning. Patients shuffle in and out, clutching their purchases as though salvation can be measured by volume. You wonder how many will swallow relief tonight, and how many will swallow their end. The line between medicine and toxin is thinner here than the walls that separate you from your neighbours. Every corridor offers another revelation. A butcher carves meat on a block that is soaked through with years of blood, the wood blackened and permanent. Flies gather despite his swats, and the cuts of meat on display bear little resemblance to the animals they once belonged to. Nearby, a workshop clatters with metal as men hammer scraps into cooking pans, sparks flying in all directions. The glow illuminates their faces, streaks with sweat, eyes narrowed against both heat and exhaustion. They work not for pride, but for survival. Their bodies as much a commodity as the pans they produce. The air here is its own enemy. It clogs your lungs with grease one moment, disinfectant the next, smoke in the one after. Each inhalation is a lucky draw from a toxic lottery. You cough into your sleeve and realise your skin already reeks of oil and blood, a scent that will follow you back to the room upstairs. Ventilation is a fantasy. The only circulation comes from fans that push one smell into another, blending them into a single cloud of discomfort. Outside, people might speak of factory conditions as if they can be regulated or improved. Inside Kowloon, the factories exist because regulation never dares to enter. You pause in a narrow corridor where several industries overlap, and the cacophony crashes into you all at once. Steam hisses, drills whine, metal clangs, voices shout over one another. It is impossible to separate them, as though the city has orchestrated its own symphony of misery. And yet, behind the grotesque surface lies efficiency. Work is constant, transactions brisk, money flowing hand to hand. Chaos, yes, but chaos that pays rent. It is difficult not to marvel at the perversity. In a city infamous for lawlessness, labour is the one discipline nobody can afford to neglect. Children weave through the corridors, carrying bowls of noodles, trays of tools, bottles of medicine. Their faces are too young for the tasks they shoulder, but their steps are practiced. They duck beneath dangling wires, dodge buckets of water, squeeze past adults, as if the maze were designed for them alone. They do not flinch at the dentist's drill or the butcher's cleaver. This is their playground, their schoolroom, their workplace. Outside the walled city, childhood is a stage of life. Here it is just another shift on the schedule. You entered seeking escape from the racket of your neighbours, only to trade it for the mechanical chorus of survival. What you left behind was personal noise, crying babies, coughing men, bickering couples. And what you find here is industrial noise, louder and sharper, but no less constant. The city offers no silence. It merely alters the soundtrack. You could climb upward or burrow downward, and you would always find a new way for sound to wedge itself into your body. Silence is the one industry Kowloon never mastered. As you continue through the corridors, the workers begin to blur together. One face blends into the next, each lined with exhaustion, each damp with sweat. Their hands are scarred, their clothes stained, their expressions resigned. Nobody stops to rest unless their body forces them to. Nobody speaks of tomorrow. Tomorrow is too large a concept for a place that barely accommodates the present. Yet the work never ceases. The noodle maker stirs his vat. The dentist drills another tooth. The pharmacist fills another bottle. The butcher cleaves another cut. Each action feeds the city, and each action feeds the illusion that life here can be sustained indefinitely. You wipe your brow, but it makes no difference. The sweat is constant now. Your body's slick with the city's breath. You pass another room where men bend over sewing machines, the fabric piled high around them. The whir of the machines blends with the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead, creating a rhythm that could almost be hypnotic if it weren't so suffocating. Finished garments hang from hooks, bright colours that contrast sharply with the gloom. They will leave this place, worn proudly by people who never think about where they were stitched. Kowloon's factories are ghosts in plain sight, their products drifting into the wider world while the labourers remain sealed behind these walls. You turn a corner and the atmosphere shifts again. The work is still there, but the people change. Shadows gather in this part of the corridor, thicker, more deliberate. Among the shadows, you notice men who don't belong to industry, but to control, the triads. Their presence is everywhere, even when unseen. The men leaning against walls in dim corridors, the ones who do not stir vats or hammer metal, are more than bystanders. They are the skeleton that holds the city upright, the quiet threat that pulses through its veins. You feel their eyes follow you as you pass, sharp enough to peel the skin from your back. They do not speak to you, but they don't need to. Their silence is not indifference, it is permission, withheld. You push deeper into the belly of the walled city and notice how every workshop, every stall, carries their imprint. The noodle maker hands a small envelope to a man at the doorway, never breaking his rhythm at the boiling vat. The butcher pauses to count coins before slipping them beneath the counter, his cleaver glistening with more than animal blood. The pharmacist ladles liquid into a bottle, while her boy fetches a folded note from beneath a jar. The transactions are swift, unobtrusive, and as routine as breathing. This is not theft or extortion, at least not in the obvious sense. It is tribute, a tithe to the shadow government that enforces its laws without writing them down. You follow the sound of laughter and find yourself at the edge of a gambling den, its entrance disguised behind a sagging curtain. Inside, men crouch around a table, dice rattling in their fists, cards slapped down with feverish energy. Cigarette smoke curls into the air, mixing with the sour tang of rice wine. The players lean in close, their eyes bloodshot, their fingers twitching as they wager coins, bills, and favours they cannot afford. Every roll of the dice is a heartbeat, every card drawn a prayer. When someone wins, the table erupts with cheers. When someone loses, silence falls heavier than stone. The triad men at the back do not play. They watch, they collect, they ensure no one forgets whose house this truly is. Further along, another curtain hides a different business. You hesitate before brushing it aside, but the smell finds you first. Acrid smoke mixed with something sweet that numbs your nose. Inside, figures slump against the walls, their eyes glassy, their arms limp, their breaths shallow. Pipes are passed hand to hand, embers glowing faintly in the gloom. A man sinks deeper into himself with each exhale, sliding further down the wall until he is part of the floor. Another laughs softly, not at anything present, but at something long since vanished. The stall is a hole carved into the city's flesh, and the triads are its surgeons. They do not heal. They maintain the wound, ensuring it festers in the most profitable way. Whispers follow you in these spaces, words exchanged so quietly they seem to rise from the walls themselves. Debts are promised, favours traded, threats disguised as suggestions. A man leans close to another, his voice low but urgent. Hands shake not in trust but in fear. You catch fragments, a number, a date, a place. Always there is the undertone of consequence, the knowledge that here an unpaid debt is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence written in ink only one man can read. You realise how easily this system works. The police rarely enter the walled city, and when they do, it is more theatre than enforcement. Raids are staged, cameras in tow, arrests made for the sake of headlines. Within days, those arrested return, the cycle resuming as though nothing happened. Everyone understands the performance, even the police themselves. Kowloon belongs to the triads, and the uniformed men outside know it. Law is not absent here. It is simply outsourced. The walled city is infamous as a place without order, yet order defines it. Rules are written in cigarette smoke and whispered debts, in the silent nods of men who never need to raise their voices. Here, lawlessness becomes its own law, and obedience is universal. You cannot live here without bending to it, whether by choice or by survival. The triads do not enforce silence, they enforce sound. The rattling of dice, the clatter of coins, the whine of drills working late into the night. All of it sanctioned, all of it permitted. You pass a stairwell where two men stand close, their posture too still to be casual. One grips the arm of another man, whose face is pale and wet with sweat. A brief exchange takes place, too quiet to catch before the man is shoved against the wall, coins spilling from his pocket. The enforcers say nothing as they gather the money. No shouting, no theatrics. The act is almost tender in its efficiency. The man who lost the money slumps, not daring to protest. He knows this is not the worst outcome, not even close. As you walk, you begin to notice that even laughter carries an edge here. The dice players laugh, but their joy is frantic, jagged, like men laughing at a funeral. The children who peek around the curtains laugh too, but their giggles vanish when the enforcers turn their heads. The sound of humour here is always provisional, as though the city itself grants it only on loan. Any moment it can be withdrawn. You catch sight of another den, this one quieter, lit by a single bulb that barely holds back the dark. Men sit cross-legged on the floor, counting bills with slow precision. The room smells of ink and sweat, the paper damp from too many hands. You understand instinctively that this is the ledger, the real heartbeat of the city. No contracts are signed, but every debt is recorded in memory, sharper than any blade. No court will settle disputes here. The men in the shadows will, and their judgments are swift, final, unquestionable. The deeper you wander, the heavier the air grows. Smoke from opium pipes mixes with the scent of frying oil, disinfectant, and sweat, until every breath tastes like surrender. You wonder how many people came here once for a game or a smoke and never left, swallowed by debts, addictions, or the simple fact that the city does not release what it consumes. The triads do not need chains or cages. The walled city itself is the prison, and the prisoners keep paying rent. You pass another doorway and glimpse a fight in progress, though it is not a fight in the cinematic sense. Two men stand in close quarters, fists clenched, but the blows are slow, deliberate, as though performed for an audience. Another man watches, arms folded, and you realize it is not a quarrel, but a lesson. Someone has failed to pay, or failed to obey, and this pantomime of violence is the reminder. The crowd outside watches in silence, their faces blank. Sympathy is a luxury no one here can afford. Everyone is too busy calculating their own survival. The corridors bend, and you find yourself circling back toward the spaces where work and crime blend seamlessly. A man hammers metal in one room, while a card game unfolds in the next. A woman sells dumplings across from a den where men collapse in smoke. There is no division between labour and vice, no clean boundary between survival and exploitation. It is all one economy, one organism, and the triads are its nervous system. Without them, the city might still function, but not for long. Your stomach growls unexpectedly, a reminder that all the smoke and noise have not dulled the simplest of needs. Hunger rises, sharp enough to cut through the haze of sweat and fear. You glance around once more at the shadows pressed into corners, the men who own the silence and the noise alike, and you know better than to linger. You retreat, slipping away from the dens and the whispers, guided now by the promise of something simpler. The smell of frying oil and steaming noodles reaches you, and you follow it as though it were a rope pulling you back to the surface. Steam rises from a cart the moment you step into the corridor where the food stalls cluster, a thick plume that curls upward and sears your throat with the sting of frying oil. The smell clings to the air so completely that you feel coated in it before you even reach the front. Vendors stand behind their carts, sleeves rolled to the elbow, their movements fast and practiced, hands darting between pots and pans with the rhythm of survival. Flames lick at the bottoms of woks, snapping as oil spits, each burst sharp enough to sting your eyes. It is a brutal kind of welcome, but it is the only welcome the city offers when your stomach growls loud enough to betray you. The first stall offers dumplings, cheap and plentiful, piled high in bamboo baskets that leak steam through their seams. The vendor pulls one free with chopsticks and drops it onto a dented plate. You bite into it and scald your tongue instantly, the burst of grease coating your mouth in a layer you will taste for hours. The filling is meaty, though you hesitate to ask what kind of meat. It could be pork or chicken, or something less easily named. You swallow anyway, more out of hunger than trust, and the dumpling sits heavy in your stomach like a stone. For all the suspicion, you reach for another. Suspicion doesn't silence hunger, and hunger here speaks louder than caution. A few steps farther, another cart hisses with noodles frying in a shallow pan. The vendor tosses them with a flick of his wrist, smoke rising in thick, greasy ribbons that mingle with the scent of soy sauce and charred garlic. The noodles are plated quickly, slapped onto paper sheets, already stained through with oil. You eat standing in the alley, your back pressed against the sweating wall, the taste sharp and salty, each bite carrying the faint grit of ash. They fill you, but the smoke burns your throat, and by the time you finish you feel less nourished than coated. In a place where hunger drives everything, the food fills you and empties you at the same time. Water comes not from bottles but from taps, and you're offered a dented tin cup, drawn fresh from a jug that might have been filled hours ago. The first sip is metallic, the taste of rust heavy on your tongue. You tell yourself it is clean enough to drink, though the pipes that delivered it above your head have long since corroded. The water cools your throat for a moment, but it leaves behind a faint aftertaste of earth and sewage. You realise too late that it has not refreshed you. It has only reminded you how desperate thirst can be. You pass another stall where skewers of meat sizzle over a charcoal brazier, the fat dripping and igniting with every hiss. The smoke is thick enough to mask the alley entirely, but the smell is undeniable, rich and inviting in its way. You buy one and chew carefully, the meat tough, stringy, yet strangely satisfying. Hunger turns suspicion into flavour. The bones crunch beneath your teeth, brittle and dry. You do not ask what animal once carried them. In Kowloon, every scrap becomes food, every part transformed into sustenance by fire and need. It is better not to know. Everywhere you turn, food is prepared in proximity to filth. Carts are positioned beside open drains, baskets of noodles stacked beneath dripping pipes, vegetables washed in water that carries the taste of iron. Flies circle lazily, landing freely, undisturbed by anyone who has long since grown used to their presence. Children crouch beside the stalls, picking at scraps dropped onto the concrete, their hands black with grease and soot. You remind yourself that you too are eating here, that the dumplings in your stomach came from the same pots, that the noodles on your plate cooled in the same smoke. You force another swallow and try not to dwell on the taste that lingers too long. And yet, for all the filth, there is vitality in the stalls. Vendors shout to one another, bantering, laughing, their voices rising above the sizzle of oil. Customers line up with bowls in hand, coins exchanged quickly, hands brushing in the heat of the transaction. The food may be suspect, but it sustains. It fuels the workers returning from the factories, the gamblers stumbling out of dens. The children, who need energy for games, play dangerously close to the edges of rooftops. Without the stalls, the walled city would grind to a halt. Survival here is not measured in years or months, but in meals, and each stall buys its customers another day. You notice, too, how flavours mingle with smells you cannot escape. The sweetness of soy sauce and garlic is always tainted by the sourness of sewage drifting up through the drains. The steam of dumplings always carries a note of mildew, the same damp odour that coats the walls of your room. Even incense, burning faintly at a small shrine nearby, cannot mask the undertone of waste that runs through every breath you take. Food tastes of hunger more than it tastes of flavour, and even when it fills you, it cannot make you forget where you're eating. A man beside you slurps from a bowl of soup, the broth cloudy, the noodles limp, his face flushed with the heat. He sighs with satisfaction, wipes his mouth on his sleeve, and goes back for another portion. You realise that satisfaction is not about taste here. It is about the absence of emptiness, however temporary. You eat the way he does, quickly, hungrily, without savouring. Each bite is less about enjoyment and more about silencing your body's demands. You chew, you swallow, you endure. Appetite here is measured in how long it takes for your stomach to stop growling, not in how the food delights you. Some stalls even experiment with small indulgences. A sweet rice cake is offered on a chipped plate, its surface glossy with syrup. You bite into it and find it cloying, the sugar overwhelming against the bitterness of everything else. The cake sticks to your teeth, the sweetness lingering long after the pleasure fades. It is almost comical, a reminder that luxury here is still just another form of discomfort. Even sweetness carries its penalty, as though the city insists you cannot have pleasure without consequence. As you finish, you notice your hands coated in grease, your shirt carrying the smoke, your mouth dry despite the water you forced yourself to drink. The food has answered your hunger, but left your body unsettled, your skin sticky, your stomach heavy. You wipe your hands against your trousers and feel the oil transfer, leaving a stain that will never fully wash out. Everything here leaves a mark, even a meal. Full but unsettled, you return to your room as night falls. You return from the food stalls with your stomach heavy and your throat raw, hoping that night might soften the city's grip. Instead, the walled city trades one set of sounds for another. The clatter of woks fades, replaced by the chorus of shouting, laughing and coughing that rises up as doors close and shadows stretch. The city does not sleep. It merely changes costume. Your room greets you with the same damp air, but now it carries the added tang of smoke and fried oil that clings to your clothes. Your family has already settled onto their mattresses, shifting under the thin sheet that divides the space. Their breathing is uneven, one of them already snoring faintly, another whispering a prayer before sleep. You lie down on the mattress, still sticky with the day's heat, and pull a thin sheet across your body, though it offers no comfort. The bulb overhead flickers uncertainly, buzzing like an insect trapped inside its own glass prison. You close your eyes, but the light penetrates your lids, faint and irritating. At last you switch it off, and the room plunges into darkness. Relief is brief. The noises pressing through the paper-thin walls grow sharper when they are all you have left to notice. From the alley outside, laughter bursts like firecrackers, harsh and sudden. Someone shouts a name, the syllables echoing down corridors until they no longer belong to a voice, but to the building itself. A woman calls for her child, her tone exasperated, then softens into laughter when he finally answers. Radios turn on, their static hum punctured by snatches of music that overlap and clash. A neighbour sings along tunelessly, his voice cracking on every note, but his enthusiasm outweighs the melody. Privacy vanishes, but loneliness still thrives, because you're surrounded by voices you will never meet. Neon signs buzz faintly through the slit in the sheet of corrugated metal that passes for your window. Their glow seeps into the room in restless colours, painting the walls with pink one moment, green the next. The light is weak, uncertain but relentless, never allowing the dark to be whole. It flickers and hums in time with the shouts and murmurs outside, a metronome for chaos. Your family shifts on their side of the curtain, their movements no quieter than those of strangers beyond the walls. Even in your own room, you are never alone. You try to sleep, but footsteps pass just beyond the door, each one sharp against the concrete. Sometimes they move quickly, urgent, as though carrying secrets from one den to another. Other times, they linger, slow and deliberate, as though testing your ability to remain still. Each creak of the stairwell, each scuff of a shoe rattles your nerves. You hold your breath, waiting for them to pass. The footsteps always do, but their echoes linger, stretching long into the silence that follows. Above you, pipes drip with mechanical patience, their rhythm carving into your skull. Each drop is a reminder of water moving where it shouldn't, trickling from unseen sources, carrying unseen filth. The sound is constant enough to lull you, but never soft enough to comfort. It is the city's lullaby, sung off key, repeated without end. You shift on your mattress, hoping to tune it out, but the dripping only grows louder in your imagination, each splash magnified until it feels like it's falling directly into your ear. Coughs punctuate the night, never distant, never absent. A man in the room beside you hacks repeatedly, the sound rattling through his chest until you wonder how his ribs can withstand it. At first you pity him, then as the coughs multiply, you resent him. Each bark snaps you awake just as you drift into the shallow edges of sleep. Babies cry, women soothe them, men shout at each other in whispers that are still too loud to ignore. Sleep becomes a negotiation between noise and exhaustion always loses. Hours pass, though you cannot measure them. Time is warped by noise. A burst of laughter convinces you it is still evening. Then a sudden hush tricks you into believing dawn must be close. The neon glow never allows the darkness to settle, so you cannot mark the night's progress. You exist in a limbo of half rest, jolted awake again and again by a city that does not recognize the concept of quiet. For people here, night is simply another shift, another version of the day with a different colour palette. The heat compounds everything. Without the sun, you thought the air might cool, but the walls radiate the day's warmth back into your skin. The fan rattles, moving the air in circles rather than refreshing it, spreading dampness instead of lifting it. Sweat gathers in the hollow of your neck, runs down your spine, sticks your clothes to your body. Sheets cling like wet paper, offering no barrier against the humid air. You try to turn, but every movement disturbs your family, who shift and mutter in their sleep. Resentment builds even here, in the space where intimacy should bring comfort. The room suffocates, the city suffocates, and the night stretches on, with no end in sight. You begin to understand why some people seek oblivion in gambling dens or opium stalls. Not for the thrill, not for the pleasure, but for the silence of escape, the brief illusion of forgetting the noise that defines this place. You, however, have only the mattress and the dripping pipes, only the coughs and the cries to lull you. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow, fractured, and cruel. When daylight finally pries its way back into the room, you realize you have a cough. Subtle at first, the kind you imagine will pass with a sip of water or a better night's rest. But the walled city is not kind. And rest never comes? The damp air presses into your lungs until every breath feels heavy, laden with the weight of mildew and grease. Soon the cough deepens, scraping at your throat, making your chest ache with each exhale. Fever follows, rising slow but steady, leaving your skin slick with sweat that never dries. In a place already stifling, the heat inside your body feels like a punishment layered on top of punishment. Your family shifts around you, restless in the same suffocating room. One child stirs from sleep to complain of a sore throat, their voice hoarse, their breath rattling. Your mother presses a damp cloth to your forehead, though it offers little relief. The water itself is warm, pulled from a basin that never cools. Everyone here is vulnerable. Illness does not knock politely, but spreads as freely as sound through plaster. A cough in one room becomes a cough in another. A fever passed from bed to bed until the line between sick and healthy is erased. The walls themselves seem to conspire in your decline. Mould blooms in black and green patches across their damp surface, spreading outward in tendrils that crawl toward the ceiling. You can see it even in the dark, a dim outline that expands each day. The spores cling to your clothes, your sheets, your skin. You breathe them in as surely as you breathe the city's air. They line your throat, irritate your lungs, and deepen the cough you cannot shake. You try to clean the walls with cloth and soap, but the stains return almost immediately, darker and more determined than before. It is as if the mould feeds on the effort itself, gaining strength from your failure. Small wounds fester here with alarming speed. A scratch from a splintered chair, a scrape against the rusted stairwell rail, a bite from one of the cats prowling the alleys. All of them swell, redden, and ooze. There is no disinfectant strong enough, no bandage clean enough to stop the rot once it begins. You hear stories of men who lost fingers, then hands, to infections that would have been trivial elsewhere. In Kowloon, the line between nuisance and catastrophe is thinner than paper. You check your own hands obsessively, watching a small cut on your knuckle as though it holds your entire fate in its jagged line. The water you drink betrays you too. Rust clings to every pipe, discolouring the flow until it smells of iron and earth. Stomach cramps twist you in the night. Your bowels turning against you after each cup. Children vomit and collapse with diarrhea, their bodies too small to withstand the loss. Mothers cradle them helplessly, whispering prayers as though words alone can replace the medicine that never arrives. It is cruel irony that in a city so dense with life, so many deaths begin with something as ordinary as a glass of water. There are no hospitals here, no clean wards with crisp sheets and antiseptic smells. What exists instead are rooms converted into clinics, run by men and women with little more than courage and improvisation. Some are skilled, their hands steady and practiced, but most are quacks, self-taught, or simply pretending. They prescribe powders of questionable origin, bitter teas, or tinctures mixed in basins that have never been sterilized. Patients queue regardless, desperation outweighing doubt. A cure that fails is better than no cure at all, and sometimes faith alone is enough to keep a person alive until the fever breaks on its own. You wonder how many recover because of the medicine, and how many recover despite it. When medicine fails, people turn to prayer. Shrines dot the corridors, small alcoves lit by sticks of incense that struggle against the damp air. You see women bow before flickering flames, their hands clasped, their lips moving silently. Offerings of fruit or rice sit on small plates, though flies claim them almost immediately. The smoke curls upward, vanishing into cracks, carrying with it whispered hopes for recovery. Your family lights incense too, the sweet scent mingling with mildew and sweat. A reminder that belief is the only antiseptic everyone can afford. Death in this place does not arrive with ceremony. It becomes an unremarkable visitor, slipping into rooms as casually as laughter or arguments. A neighbour you heard coughing through the wall last night falls silent today, and you realise without asking what has happened. The city does not pause to mark his passing. The family wails briefly, then packs his things, making space for survival even in grief. The body will be carried out quietly, perhaps in daylight, perhaps at night, and the space he occupied will be reclaimed. Death here is not tragedy. It is routine, as much a part of life as eating dumplings from a street stall or wiping sweat from your brow. You feel your fever deepen, the ache in your bones spreading until even lying still is painful. Your family tends to you as best they can, your mother dabbing your forehead, your siblings fetching water, your father muttering reassurance he doesn't believe himself. They cannot stop what spreads through the air, through the water, through the walls. Their presence comforts you in one sense and terrifies you in another. You are sick, but so are they, and the line between care and contagion vanishes when everyone shares the same room. You listen to life continue around you. Outside your door, vendors still fry dumplings, their oil hissing over fire. Children still chase one another down slick corridors, their shrieks echoing. Radios still play music distorted by static. Sickness and death are constants, but they do not interrupt the rhythm of survival. Neighbours share bowls of rice, pass along scraps of medicine, check on children, not their own. The city consumes its weak, but it also refuses to let them go unnoticed. Survival is communal, even when illness is not. You drift in and out of shallow sleep, fever blurring the line between dream and waking. The cough rattles your chest with every breath, each exhale sharp enough to make your ribs ache. Your mother's voice cuts through the haze, scolding a sibling for wasting water, soothing another who has begun to cough themselves. You realise that illness does not strike alone. It multiplies, weaving through the room, marking each body in turn. Soon, everyone will cough. Everyone will sweat through the night. Everyone will gamble with fevers and chills. Several days pass before the fever finally breaks, leaving you weak but still breathing. Your cough lingers a little longer, dry and irritating, until even that fades into memory. Illness is not forgotten here. It leaves behind exhaustion, a new awareness of fragility, the quiet fear that it may return at any time. But recovery is possible, and you emerge from it thinner, slower, but still alive. You're not alone in that. Around you, neighbours stagger back to their routines, their voices returning to the chorus that fills the walls. The rhythm of the walled city resumes as though nothing had happened, as though sickness were simply another temporary condition, like hunger or heat. Life continues, and it is in that continuation that you begin to notice something unexpected. Against the backdrop of misery, small kindnesses stand out more sharply than you ever imagined. A woman down the corridor arrives at your door one evening, carrying a bowl of broth, still steaming. It smells stronger than the mould around you. She does not ask for thanks, only places it on the floor and departs, her shadow swallowed by the stairwell. Another neighbour passes along a scrap of medicine, insisting it has done wonders for her child's cough, though she could just as easily have kept it for herself. These gestures are modest, barely enough to alter circumstance, but in the walled city they feel monumental. Survival here is not possible in isolation. Everyone leans on everyone else, whether they like it or not. Children are the clearest proof of this collective survival. You watch as they are herded not by their own parents alone, but by whoever happens to be available. A neighbour leans out of her doorway to scold one boy for running too close to the edge of the roof. Another drags a girl away from a dripping pipe before she can drink from it. Babies are passed from arm to arm, soothed not only by mothers but by sisters, cousins, neighbours whose names you might never learn. In a place where space is most limited, responsibility is most expansive. Everyone becomes a guardian because no one can afford not to be. The shrines scattered through the alleys become gathering points for this fragile sense of community. You see incense burning at all hours, sticks glowing faintly in the gloom, their smoke curling into the damp air. People pause as they pass, bowing briefly, touching their palms together in prayers for health, for protection, for one more day of endurance. Offerings appear beside the incense, bowls of rice, coins, bits of fruit, left by families who can spare almost nothing, yet still find a way to share. Flies gather quickly, but no one sweeps the offerings away. They are not for consumption. They are symbols of persistence, reminders that even in the most crowded, unsanitary city on earth, people still reach toward the divine. You notice the way food circulates. When one family prepares dumplings, they set aside a portion for the neighbour whose husband is bedridden. When another boils soup, the aroma spreads not only because the walls are thin, but because a portion is carried across the hall. Plates pass from door to door, bowls exchanged and returned, spoons clinking softly in the night. Hunger is constant, but it is shared. To deny someone else food would be to deny yourself the same courtesy when your turn comes. In this economy of scarcity, generosity is not noble. It is practical. It is insurance against tomorrow. The community is not without its contradictions. You know your neighbours intimately through the sounds that bleed into your room, their arguments, their laughter, their coughs, but you rarely exchange more than nods in passing. Privacy is impossible, yet politeness demands pretense. You hear too much, but you speak too little. And still, beneath the strained silences and the overcrowding, there is a current of solidarity. The city is unlivable, but its people refuse to vanish. Humanity thrives most here, ironically, where conditions are most hostile. The walled city crushes its residents, yet somehow forges bonds tighter than those formed in the open spaces outside. You begin to see the rituals of endurance as forms of resistance. Laundry lines strung across rooftops are not only practical, but decorative. splashes of colour against the endless grey concrete. Lanterns appear during festivals, glowing weakly in the alleys but glowing all the same. Children fashion toys from discarded scraps, turning rubbish into entertainment. Women gather in groups to sew, their chatter rising above the drone of fans. Men play cards or mahjong long into the night, their laughter frayed but genuine. Each act, small and easily dismissed, asserts life where it should not be possible. On one evening, you join your family and neighbours on the roof, where a small celebration has formed. Someone has cooked more rice than usual. Another has brought a battered radio that sputters out music through static. Children dance, their steps clumsy but enthusiastic, while adults clap along, their smiles weary but real. You catch yourself smiling too, surprised at the sensation. For a brief moment, the claustrophobia loosens. The walls do not disappear, but they recede just enough for you to breathe. The city remains a cage, but in that cage people sing. Freedom exists here, not in space but in defiance, in the refusal to let misery have the last word. Yet even as you witness these moments of solidarity, the city does not allow you to forget its cruelty. Illness still circulates, injuries still fester, hunger still gnaws at bellies. You hear a wail from a room down the corridor and know another death has occurred, another family now facing the impossible task of grieving in public. The incense smoke grows thicker in response, prayers multiplying as fast as mould spreads across walls. Community here is never comfortable. It is forged in shared suffering, in the knowledge that endurance is the only form of triumph most will ever know. Time passes, measured not by calendars, but by the steady rhythm of daily survival. Weeks blur into months, and months into years, your family falling into the same patterns as everyone else. You help cook when food arrives, fetch water when it can be trusted, share medicine when it circulates. You become part of the network, woven into the threads of routine, indistinguishable from the others who live and endure within these walls. The city has consumed you, but it has also incorporated you, making you part of something larger. You resent it, yet you also rely on it. That contradiction defines everything here, and then abruptly the rhythm falters. News spreads in whispers at first, then louder, echoing down corridors and stairwells until everyone is talking. Demolition orders have been posted. The government outside, the one that never truly entered, has decided the walled city cannot remain. The city that once seemed to swallow you whole has become routine, even familiar. You know which corridors flood after a storm, which stairwells smell worst in the summer, which vendors are most generous with their noodles. You have coughed through winters and sweated through summers. You have learned to sleep through the noise that once kept you awake. You have survived illness and hunger alike. Your family, once newcomers, are now simply part of the labyrinth. It is not a life you would have chosen, but it has become life nonetheless. That is why the notices sting. You thought you would endure the walled city until it consumed you. Instead, someone outside has decided to consume it first. Families crowd around the posted orders, reading them aloud in disbelief, as though repeating the words might change their meaning. Some shout, others laugh bitterly. A few shake their heads in silence. What shocks everyone most is not the idea that the city will end. People have whispered for years that it could not last forever, but that the order has finally arrived in writing. Official stamps, bold characters, government seals, symbols of a world that long pretended not to see this place, suddenly declaring its visibility by erasing it. Eviction does not come all at once. It drags across months, each day peeling another layer of life away. You watch as neighbours pack their belongings, stacking them in the corridor before carrying them out like funerary processions. Mattresses stained from years of sweat are folded and tied with rope. Pots and pans dented by constant use are bundled into sacks. Chairs, tables, shelves, all battered, all cracked, all still needed, are carried down the stairwells by hands that once carried groceries or children. The possessions that survived years of mould and rats are undone not by decay but by paperwork. Vendors cling to their stalls for as long as possible. Steam still rises from dumpling baskets, oil still spits from woks, broth still bubbles in battered pots. Customers line up even as rumours spread that the bulldozers are scheduled to arrive. Eating becomes an act of defiance, as though another bite of noodles could hold the city together. But gradually, the lines shrink, the steam fades, and the stalls vanish, leaving behind stains on the concrete where thousands of meals once began. Hunger disperses into the wider city, but the appetite of Kowloon itself dies with its kitchens. The sound of demolition is unlike anything you've heard before. The walled city always rattled and groaned, its pipes dripping, its walls sighing beneath weight, its inhabitants coughing and shouting. But bulldozers introduce a new kind of violence. Their metal jaws grind into concrete with mechanical hunger, gnawing at walls that once seemed immovable. Dust rises in great clouds, choking the air with the city's own remains. You cover your mouth with a cloth, but it is useless. You inhale the rubble as surely as you once inhaled mildew and smoke. The city insists on entering your lungs, even in death. You walk the corridors as they empty, each one quieter than the last. Rooms that once pulsed with radios and voices stand bare. Their walls scarred with mould, but stripped of life. Doorways gape like missing teeth, corridors stretch in eerie silence, stairwells creak with no feet pressing them down. The labyrinth, once deafening, becomes a mausoleum. You feel the absence more than you ever felt the presence. It is as though the walls themselves resent being emptied. Their groans louder in vacancy than they ever were in occupation. Your own family gathers their things in the same way. The mattresses that once seemed permanent fixtures are rolled and tied. The fan that circulated stale air is finally unplugged, its last rattle silenced. The small shelf of dishes is packed, each chipped plate wrapped in cloth, each dented cup tucked away. You carry bundles down the stairwell, retracing the path you took years ago when you first entered. The same walls press against your shoulders, the same pipes drip onto your clothes, but everything feels different now. The corridors no longer lead to life. They lead only outward. Outside, you watch as bulldozers sink their teeth into the city's edge. The outer walls crumble first, chunks of concrete tumbling down like broken teeth. Entire rooms are exposed in cross-section. A bed still against one wall, a chair still against another, all of it suddenly public. Intimate lives cracked open like dollhouses. You see wallpaper peeling in squares, staircases ending abruptly in mid-air, half rooms dangling until they collapse. The labyrinth unravels piece by piece, its secrets laid bare, and then erased in the same motion. Dust coats everything. It settles in your hair, your clothes, your lungs. You hear children cough, their voices sharp in the haze, their eyes wide as they watch bulldozers chew through the buildings that were their playgrounds. Adults stand in silence, arms folded, expressions tight. Some watch with relief, glad to see an end to years of damp and squalor. Others weep openly, mourning not beauty, but familiarity. The strange comfort of walls that, however cruel, were theirs. The walled city was prison and shelter both, and now it is neither. Days stretch into weeks, the demolition advancing like an army, slow but relentless. Each blow of the machines collapses another section, each collapse echoing across the district. The ground shudders, the air fills with grit, and the labyrinth that consumed you for years dissolves into rubble. You try to hold on to its shape in your mind. The corridors, the alleys, the rooms stacked on rooms. But the dust erases memory, as surely as the machines erase walls. When it's finally over, you stand at the edge of what was once the densest city on earth and see nothing but an expanse of broken concrete. The place that held 30,000 lives, that forced intimacy through paper walls and built community in spite of itself, is gone. The noise has stopped, the smells have cleared, the neon no longer flickers. The city is silent now, not with the shallow quiet of night, but with finality. Years pass. You look back on the vanished city from the present day, standing at the edge of what has replaced it. Where the labyrinth once loomed, there is now open space, greenery, and pathways laid out in neat lines. The air smells cleaner here, the sky stretches freely, and the light falls without resistance. Children play openly on grass where once they darted through corridors slick with grease. Tourists wander with cameras, eager to photograph the absence of what once horrified the world. Yet for you, the park feels hollow, as though the ground beneath it still remembers the weight of the walls that stood here. The walled city lives on in fragments, photographs snapped by outsiders who marvelled at its density. Documentaries that spoke of it as though it were myth, and the memories carried by those who once inhabited its alleys. You find yourself in those photographs sometimes, if only in spirit, a glimpse of a narrow stairwell you climbed daily, a shot of a food stall where you once ate dumplings so hot they scalded your tongue, the silhouette of a room with a fan buzzing in the corner. The images capture the grotesque, the claustrophobic, the decayed, but they never capture the full texture. They cannot smell the mildew, hear the coughing, feel the dampness seeping into every possession. They show the walled city, but they do not contain it. You remember the contradictions most vividly. It was a place where lawlessness reigned, yet everyone followed rules etched in silence and smoke. It was suffocating, yet it forced bonds between strangers stronger than any neighbourhood outside. It was dangerous, yet it was also alive in ways that the orderly city beyond never managed. You hated living there, resented the damp walls, the thin plaster, the endless coughs, and yet you belonged to it because belonging was not optional. When you close your eyes, you can still feel the heat radiating from the roof at midday, your skin burning even as you reached gratefully for the patch of sky above. You still hear the rattle of mahjong tiles, the hiss of oil in a wok, the laughter of children running dangerously close to edges that had no barriers. You smell incense curling up from a shrine in a corner, competing with sewage and fried garlic. These impressions rise unbidden, fragments of a world erased in concrete but etched permanently into your senses. Memory becomes its own labyrinth, and you remain trapped inside it long after the walls fell. You think of your neighbours, the ones you never knew by name but knew by sound, the man whose cough marked your nights, the baby whose cries punctuated your mornings, the woman whose radio was always tuned slightly off station. They exist now only as echoes in your mind, voices carried on a static frequency you cannot turn off. You wonder where they went, whether they survived the transition into orderly housing beyond the ruins, or whether the demolition scattered them as thoroughly as it scattered the city itself. In the absence of answers, you hold on to their sounds. It is the only way to keep them from vanishing completely. Stories of the walled city spread differently now. Outsiders describe it as a nightmare, a monument to chaos, a living hell. They are not wrong, but their accounts feel incomplete. They speak of vice, of crime, of darkness so thick that sunlight dared not enter. They do not speak of the bowl of broth left quietly at your door when fever gripped you, or the neighbour who hushed your sibling back to sleep in the middle of the night, or the moment laughter on the roof carried you through another day. They do not understand that the walled city was both grotesque and humane, cruel and tender, suffocating and sustaining. The demolition erased the structures, but could not erase the paradoxes. Memory is heavier than rubble. You feel its weight every time You step through the new park, where informational plaques attempt to summarize decades of endurance with a few tidy sentences. They tell you the walled city housed 30,000 people, that it was demolished in the 1990s, that it has been reborn as a place of leisure. The numbers are neat, the facts efficient, the narrative clean. But none of that captures what it meant to live with paper-thin walls, with dripping pipes, with triads lurking in the shadows, with neighbours who both irritated and sustained you. None of it captures what it meant to call the unlivable home. You walk these grounds and feel the dissonance. Birds sing where once radios crackled. Wind stirs through trees where once smoke thickened the air. The silence is unnerving. Too perfect, too fragile. It lacks the heartbeat of the walled city, the relentless rhythm that once defined your days. The world insists this is progress, that destruction of the labyrinth was necessary, that no one should have been forced to live in such conditions. You do not disagree, and yet a part of you aches for the noise, for the chaos, for the flawed community that emerged in the cracks. Absence, it turns out, is harder to bear than presence. You remember the day the walls collapsed, the dust that coated your tongue, the rubble that filled your lungs. You recall how quickly the city vanished once the machines began their work, how entire lives were flattened. The ground shook, the air thickened, the labyrinth dissolved, and all that remained was memory. And that memory clings stubbornly, surfacing in dreams, in scents, in echoes you cannot silence. It reminds you that the walled city was never simply a place. It was a world unto itself, with its own laws, its own rhythms, its own cruel comforts. In the years since, you have lived elsewhere. You have slept in rooms with thicker walls, drunk water that tasted of nothing at all, walked streets that opened wide to the sky. Yet the walled city haunts you, not as nostalgia, but as a reminder of what humanity does under pressure. You survived not because the place was livable, but because people insisted on living anyway. That refusal, that stubborn endurance, is what echoes most loudly. The walls may be gone, but the lives they once held refuse to fade completely. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story, where an ordinary family tried to carve out a life in Kowloon walled city, a place so dense and chaotic that it seemed indestructible until the world decided it should vanish. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Rich Davis. Sleep well.